At the end of 2013, the PlayStation 4 would release and usher in a generation of gaming, which was, frankly, more significant than people gave it credit for. In particular if you are a traditional console fan. A short reminder of what the game industry looked like in 2013. 8 years after the first HD generation began, with Xbox 360 and PS3. The cost of game development rose so much, many smaller studios and even once big names like GHQ were shut down, while the enormous growth of multiplayer shooters like Call of Duty made many publishers believe that only similar online games could be profitable, or offline games which tried to appeal to the same crowd with aesthetics in the vein of Gears of War, leading to the rise of generic, angry, bald dude. Cheaper to make mobile games arose as another big moneymaker, and developers of games like Angry Birds were proclaiming the death of traditional games. Japan was a prime example of all this. Developers had a hard time adopting the new tech, and in famous quotes by Square Enix responded to the controversial reception of the drastically linear Final Fantasy XIII by saying that HD towns are hard to make. While mobile gaming was declared the new main resource for many old Japanese IPs, the Wii seemed like a bridge between both worlds, focusing on less costly console games with family appeal. Yet it died off only halfway through the generation. Attempts to copy Western shooting games rarely succeeded, and certain developers from Japan declared their own industry as failed. Old school single player games without gimmicks seemed to come to an end. Yet with the PS4 generation it came different. Not right away, but ultimately this generation became proof that there always was a place for a diverse set of traditional console-type games. And I'm not even talking about Sony big hitters like God of War or Spider-Man. While things like online games and mobile titles that prioritize microtransactions never went away as the big moneymakers, that rift that grew during the PS360 era between safe AAA projects on one side and indie games on the other started to fade away. As it turned out, the desire for old-school mid-budget titles and even unapologetically Japanese games had been growing a lot. Series once considered niche, like Persona and Nier, went from selling a couple 100,000 copies in the past to being multi-million sellers on PS4. So even if they did not reach the biggest sales numbers on the market, they could be successful in their own right, which opened the gates for a plethora of games which had almost become invisible. Genres that were deemed dead, like beat-em-ups, JRPGs, hardcore side-scrollers, visual novels, 3D platformers and more, all had a comeback. To drive this point home, I would like to put the spotlight of this retrospective on some of these many unexpected hits and generation highlights. As mentioned before, starting at the very end of 2013, the generation didn't feel like it quite kicked in immediately. Around 2015, the tides seemed to turn. During the E3 showcases in summer, almost unthinkable projects like Nier Automata, the revival of The Last Guardian and the Final Fantasy VII remake, alongside fresh IPs like Horizon Zero Dawn, were announced almost at the same time. It was also becoming clear that the old PS360 generation could no longer hold the new consoles back. Metal Gear Solid 5 marked one of the last cross-generation releases.
Kept you waiting, huh?
And made it apparent that you were robbing yourself the true experience if you played on old consoles. MGS5 in particular, despite disappointing longtime series fans by not concluding the story in a satisfying way, still felt like next generation gameplay. In fact, I would argue that to this day, almost no sandbox, let alone in the stealth genre, was this satisfying to play. The freedom and smooth controls felt way beyond prior generation sandbox stealth games like Assassin's Creed. But 2015 also for many established a first instant classic of this generation, which was Bloodborne. As developer From Software could take their masterful level design of Dark Souls and apply it to a Lovecraftian nightmare with the backing of Sony, which made it all the more polished and immersive, creating a masterpiece for fans of horror, action role-playing games and just good old video game exploration, which despite being a high-budget first-party game, did not dump down its vision for a supposed casual appeal. In 2016, the reboot of Doom also appealed to old-school audiences, which brought back many fans that gave up on the genre. Ignoring trends set by more cinematic first-person shooters of PS3 and Xbox 360, Doom 2016 was all about traditional shooter virtues, but giving them modern speed and control, to the point that it even made fun of story and tutorial-heavy shooters of late, and focused on being a metal, hardcore bullet spree with engaging level design. But it was really 2017 which opened the floodgates, not only for PS4 but also Xbox One and Switch, making some of the strongest and most diverse years of gaming since the industry had turned to high definition. One of the more shocking things was Resident Evil being shocking. After all, developer Capcom and the series in particular were a prime example of neglecting what made them once great to appeal to supposed casual audiences during the Xbox 360 days. After the overproduced co-op action-focused Resident Evil 6 blew up in their faces, Resident Evil 7 was all horror. Initially it looked like one of those hide-and-seek games like Outlast, but it wasn't that at all. The game gave old series traits such as exploring, puzzle solving and item management a fresh coat of paint, featuring some of the most intense moments of the series. For the first time in years, you felt that old relief at the sound of the save room music, and the dread before going down a creepy basement. The game would lose some steam in the second half, but this was only the beginning of this new Resident Evil era anyway. Because later, the remake of Resident Evil 2 was a continuation of what made RE7 good. It wasn't a simple remake, but much more of a new interpretation of old survival horror, and basically made it a whole new game. To compensate for the limited camera angles and controls of old, they implemented new enemy behavior, which made those old-fashioned slow zombies even more dangerous and unpredictable in a smart way. The map design of the iconic police station is different from the original, but maybe even more complex than before. RE2 Remake guides players through the relatively open map in a wonderfully non-intrusive way, and naturally incorporates elements like the all-new stalking gameplay of Mr. X. Beyond that, in an unprecedented move, Capcom reversed the reboot of Devil May Cry, which tried a little too hard to appeal to Western audiences, and gave the series back to the makers of Devil May Cry 3.
Devil May Cry and Hideaki Itsuno are back!
After they realized that people always wanted those uncompromised Japanese IPs, even Mega Man had a small comeback. The action platforming offered a wonderful mix of old and new, instead of just being a rehash, and became very much a great platformer to replay. However, the biggest surprise was Monster Hunter World. After being trapped in a niche existence on underpowered handheld systems, making the series only successful in Japan, Capcom finally gave fans the big budget home console Monster Hunter game people asked for. And it became the most successful Capcom game of all time. Thanks to the new tech, the Dino Hunts finally became as epic as they deserve to be. They also cut out some of the more convoluted gimmicks of prior Monster Hunter games and focused on the important parts of the hunting action. Another unexpected comeback, even if to a lesser degree, happened to Sega. While Sonic did not always have it easy, Sonic Mania has shown why the Blue Blur ever had cult status in the first place. This collaboration between Sega and fan developers initially seemed like a souped up level pack, but in reality it transformed the 2D Sonic formula into a firework of great gameplay ideas and style. In terms of level and graphic design, Sonic Mania feels like a lost 32-bit Sonic game that could have been a masterpiece on Sega Saturn. A similar dynamic brought us Streets of Rage 4, in which developers who were clear fans of the originals and Sega veterans, namely composer Yuzo Koshiro, brought back the beat-em-up genre that was thought to be dead and freed it from its old shackles. As someone very familiar with the controls of the classics, Part 4 felt like dropping the training weights. It doesn't quite come close to Part 2 in terms of the music. After all, the old soundtrack is an all-time classic, but the new music is more dynamic and correlates perfectly with the level and art direction. Making for a glorious beating throughout the tight campaign, which just like Sonic Mania is amazing to replay at any time, making both of them some of the strongest Sega branded games ever made. Staying true to their old strengths, but also going beyond what was made in the past. For other people, the Sega highlight was Yakuza 0. After the PS3 generation, during which fans always had to worry about Yakuza games not getting localized or being delayed for years, the PlayStation 4 finally brought the series into the spotlight with its prequel Yakuza 0, which has all the melodrama, hardcore fighting action, arcade lunacy and insane side activities within the sandbox red light district of Tokyo, which the series is now known for. Point being that the unusual wacky nature of the sandbox beat-em-up that has no qualms being purely Japanese finally found a platform to hit a nerve. And really it was the PS4 that saved the series from near cancellation in Western countries. With PS4 also came the time for Souls clones. Among the competition it was really Team Ninja, who established themselves as a unique alternative to the originals, with Nioh. Nioh took a bit of Souls, but also a bit of their old fast-paced action from Ninja Gaiden. The great strength was therefore not so much level design, like in the games of From Software, but the faster combat with fresh mechanics, like sword poses and stamina regain. But as fun as Nioh was, it was the sequel Nioh 2 that became one of the most delightful action games of the generation. New mechanics, like the summoning of defeated demons, on top of very satisfying attack feedback, made for a top-tier combat system. In the meantime, From Software itself has proven that they can do more than Souls and Bloodborne. Some people might want to put Sekiro into the same box as those games, like it was just another iteration of the same formula. But it is quite different, I would say. Instead of a dark fantasy role-playing game, it's much more of an action-adventure. Since it has more linear stages, a much more agile character who is able of parkouring and receiving new skills like underwater swimming, instead of having individual builds. Sekiro is a ninja adventure of old, except that combat was quite on another level, because katana fights rarely felt so hefty. Too bad about some camera issues in a couple of places. Speaking of Activision, which surprisingly published Sekiro, you gotta give credit where it's due. Despite refocusing on Call of Duty later on, they had quite a diverse quality run. Not only thanks to Sekiro and the, in my opinion, very underrated Platinum Games Transformers title, but also thanks to the remakes of titles like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater and Crash Team Racing, which have proven that gameplay can be timeless, even if it stems from a rough generation like the PS1 era. All these games were super polished, much more than other retro releases in the market. Since Crash became an enormous success and showed that people had never lost interest in 3D platformers, we even got the whole new Crash Bandicoot 4. While some people might debate the quality of the old Crash games, Crash 4 is legit good. A hardcore platformer reminiscent of the NES days, but with a big budget look and solely focused on tight platforming with little to no gimmicks. Cinematic action adventures such as Uncharted and God of War experienced a new high. I would give a shout out to Hellblade, which made for an immersive cinematic adventure despite a lower budget. The journey in Hellblade was more of a Silent Hill type psychological nightmare, which made it never quite clear whether its violence was real or imagined. With that, it also circumvents a criticism towards these cinematic action adventures called ludonarrative dissonance, which means that arcade-style action doesn't always fit the tone of the story, but in Hellblade, the outlandish violence correlates perfectly with the story. If some of the puzzles and exploring were more sophisticated, Hellblade could have maybe been a masterpiece. Another pleasant surprise in surreal storytelling was Control. The responsible Remedy Studios finally made a whole game out of the more twisted parts of Max Payne. But not as a linear cinematic shooter, but a more open action adventure featuring a great and innovative mixture of over-the-top shootouts and telekinesis gameplay, on top of visually stunning surreal backdrops, which were all the more fascinating to explore. On the Sony side, I would give credit to the Shadow of the Colossus remake. Atmospherically, the original is a timeless masterpiece. There's nothing quite like its contrast between the bombastic fights against the overwhelming colossi and traveling the desolate landscapes. The new look of the remake was criticized by some people for being too clean. But on the other hand, they finally made the controls, camera and button layout feel much more natural, which for me gave Shadow of the Colossus on PS4 the grandness it deserved. A genre to reach all new heights was Metroidvania, certainly in quantity. It feels like there's few genres that indie developers release more games for. Many of them did not quite stand out, but all the more did Hollow Knight. Not only thanks to its wonderfully drawn art direction for its fallen underground kingdom, it was also a Metroidvania game giving exploration a new impetus by limiting the time you have access to the map until you find a map maker in each zone. There's a new sense of wonder and dread in many of its spooky areas. Ironically, the Castlevania series itself didn't cash in on the Metroidvania hype, as developer Konami started to bail out of core gaming after Metal Gear Solid 5. Thankfully that did not matter too much, because with Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, one of the genre godfathers, Koji Igarashi, returns and for the first time since Castlevania Symphony of the Night released a brand new home console Metroidvania. It does not have the most beautiful graphics, but the map design, music and combat felt on par with the stronger Castlevania games. 2D did not just mean rehash, however. For many years and at many conferences, Xbox teased us with Cuphead, a supposed old-school platformer. In reality, it was very much its own thing, as a beautifully animated boss rush game, which was reminiscent of old cartoons and 16-bit action games. But the way it combined these elements, it was also nothing like them. Cuphead is much more than references. It created its very own world that went way beyond its inspirations. And that actually sums up the games of PS4 and Xbox One quite well. The generation brought back many strengths and forgotten gaming virtues of old, but in a fresh guise, with new twists, a whole new scope, and with modern sensibilities, sometimes better and more creative than before. Only one generation prior, it was almost unthinkable to see some of these franchises or genres as high-profile releases on the storefronts or in sales charts. People were told they did not want these games anymore, but they did. The PS4 generation has shown that focusing on good, creative console games for a big variety of core fans, instead of following trends like games as a service just for the sake of it, will create a better gaming industry.